Hey all, I'd like to do a little tutorial on brush technique. So I've just got some paper that I'm going to be playing on. Don't need to use canvas for this at all. It's just a practice session. And I'm using this mixed media paper. So it's good for acrylics, but you do not need it. You can use your regular letterhead paper from your printer. That's totally fine for playing around like this. We're just gonna get a feel for the brush and the different brush strokes and loading paint and different applications that you can use for the brush strokes. So I've got my palette loaded up here with my primary colors, yellow, red, blue, and some white. I like to keep it very simple, especially when teaching. So I use just two brushes here. I have a small round brush, okay, and that gives me my details. And then I have a medium-sized, this is called a filbert because the top is rounded. It's flat when you look at it sideways, so it actually works really well. I really theoretically could do most of the painting that I do with just this brush, because when I turn it sideways, it becomes similar to this brush here. Okay, this one is nice for getting in those tinier spots. So for that, I just say having two brushes of this general shape and size will be perfectly good for all the tutorials I do. And you can definitely introduce other styles of brushes. I recommend you play around with different brushes, just to get a feel for them, but you do not need to go fancy or anything like that. Just if you want to explore a little bit further. I've recently discovered these angled brushes and I love them because they're also very versatile. So I can use this to cover large areas. I can use this at just the tip to get my details. So it also works as a multi sort of like 3-in-1 brush. I can do lines, dots, big washes with it. So a very handy brush. So if you just had to buy one brush, I'd probably suggest something like this. Okay. But like I said, I do everything with basically these two brushes. You can get real fancy and start getting into fan brushes like that. I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with these brushes. They're fun. Don't get me wrong. I loved experimenting with these. When I first started painting, I thought they were the coolest thing. But they have a very distinct style that comes along with them. And you can do what these do with other brushes. So by no means do you need to go out and start getting 100 different brushes. Okay, we're going to keep it simple and just use these two. I'll show you how these work as well if you want to play around with them. But for everything we do, we just keep it simple. Okay. So let's talk about loading your brush. And what that is just picking up the paint. And these are sort of things you'll get the feel of more and more as you do it. So depending on what we're doing, is how much paint I pick up. So if I'm just working on a small area, I'll just do a small little dip in there. And then if I'm working on a big area, I'll do a big dip. So just something to be thinking about when you're taking your paint, when you're scooping it out of your palette. Okay, I'm going to show you a few techniques here just with the brush. Let's start with, I like to call them names. I have Baby Bear is the small one. Mama Bear is the big one. We have a Papa Bear. He's a big flat brush. Let me see if I have one here. I do. So there's Papa Bear. So we got the whole family here. But for my tutorials that I'm doing right now, they're typically under a certain size, 12 by 12. So I don't really need Papa Bear right now. And that was just to make it simple for everybody so that you don't need to go out and buy a whole whack of brushes. But if you do like to work big, having a bigger brush is handy to fill in those large spaces. Okay, so let's just play with some paint for a little while, right? What I do like to do sometimes is dip my brush in my water. Okay, so it's nice and wet. I will mix a color here to show you what I usually do. So I usually like to make a purple color at the very beginning of my paintings to do what I call the drawing sketch. So that's made up of blue. And then when I go to grab, sometimes I just go right in there with my color, but if I'm being a good artist, I will rinse out my brush. In between colors here. So some red. I will do, let's say 2 scoops of red. I've got a video for mixing colors, so I highly recommend that if you're new to acrylics and just want to see how to make the color guide. That is another tutorial. Okay, so I've got a purple color here, right? So again, with that water, what I like to do is just dip my brush in the water, pull out some water. When you're first starting a painting, the canvas can be very dry. It's very porous and it sucks in the paint, and it can be hard to get good coverage. So at the beginning stage, I often do this with my brush or my paint, mix it in here with some water. Okay. Couple other things to preface how you hold your brush, right? A lot of us hold it just like a pen, like we're writing with a pen or pencil. Okay. That's a good technique that gives you a lot of control. You're basically just using your wrist to draw or paint at that point. What I like to do is actually pretend as if I'm just picking up my brush off the table. Okay. So, like so, that then opens up your whole arm to give you much wider brush strokes. It's really more of a technique you'll see if you're working large scale, but it still works well in these smaller formats just to loosen up your grip a lot. Okay. So just keep that in mind. If you feel like you're getting too tight in your canvas, try holding it this way. Okay. Most of the stuff we do will just be like the regular style of holding your brush. Okay. So let's put some paint down. Okay. So I've got my paint loaded in here. Now there's different techniques you can do if you just want to do straight lines. Feel the pressure of the brush. If I press harder, that's a much broader stroke. If I lighten it up, it can get skinny. Okay, just feel your brushes out, see what they're capable of doing. A lot of my brush strokes are kind of like broken lines. I like to call them like those dashed lines. I like to paint in an impressionistic style. And so instead of doing straight lines, I prefer to just start and stop them every once in a while. See what you can do with just the tip of the brush. See what you can do with some curves. Twist your brush around. We're just playing, having fun. Multiple brush strokes. A lot of my other techniques are like a scumble. So that's like when there's not a lot of paint left in the brush and it's a bit dry. It's like a dry brush at that point, just to get a little bit of color onto the canvas. I'm going to go into the purple without water here. So another technique is a crisscross brush stroke. So you can do that. And just feel your brushes out here. Play, play, play. That's the idea. We want to have fun, and this should be an enjoyable experience. So that's Baby Bear Brush. That's kind of what Baby Bear Brush can do. And you can experiment with different techniques of your own. Okay. Let's see what Mama Bear Brush can do. Also a good tip here, try not to leave your brushes in your water. What happens is the weight of the brush is going to press down, and then it's going to kind of misshape your brush, and it'll get a funny shape and it'll be really hard to get out. So I always just like to give them a good pounce to the bottom of the jar, get out the excess water, and then dry them off on my paper towel and set them down flat. Best way to keep your brushes is flat. So there's no pressure on them and they're not going to go all wonkadoo on you. That's a technical term. Okay, so I got Mama Bear Brush here. Let's try some of the same techniques here. We'll just go into the watered down paint. Now, Mama Bear has got a rounded edge, so you can see that there. Let me mix a bit more paint. Okay, so you can see that rounded edge just gives your painting a little bit of a softer touch. And depending on how much pressure you put, again, will depend on the brush stroke size. Okay? You'll also get a feel for how your acrylics cover. So by that I mean how solid do they look, how opaque are they, or how transparent are they? What you can do is take a Sharpie marker and draw a line. I think I'll do that to show you a few examples. Okay, so I've just got a black Sharpie marker here. I'll just do a couple lines off to the side here. We'll get to that later. Okay, so you can see how light and heavy pressure work. Let's see what the other side of our brush does. Aha, a nice skinny line. So there you can see it's a really good backup to the Baby Bear brush. So you can still get fine detail with this Mama Bear brush. And again, I like to do these sort of dashed lines a lot of the time. So practicing that is good. Seeing how much water you like in your paint. Experiment with different levels of water. You see how it glides with just a little bit more water in there? Kind of nice. As you get through the painting, you don't want to be thinning the paints too much. You'll just want to be loading up the brush more. So by that, I just mean a good scoop. If you need to go over top of like wet paint, for instance, you want to pick up a good amount of paint. And that's what I mean by loading the brush up. Another thing to note, let me draw. So I got a nice dollop of wet paint here. I'll rinse out this brush. And let's just go in with a fun color here. Maybe something pink. So this is a technique to layer. Let's do a little bit more color. More white. More paint, sorry. Okay, so load my brush up. When I have lots of paint on my canvas and it's all wet, you'll notice that it's hard to paint on, okay, if you do the normal brush technique. What I like to do instead of like scraping the paint is I load it up real thick, okay? This is when I use my other, holding my brush, like I pick it up off the table. See, I got a big dollop of paint on there. And then I simply hold my brush parallel to my work surface, my canvas or paper, and I lightly drag it across. See how nice that comes out instead of the other way where it's scraping? Because instead of scraping the paint, the wet and the new stuff together, I'm just allowing it to like literally glide off of it here. So that's a good technique when you're working wet on wet, to just gently let the paint be pulled off the brush, stick on top, instead of mixing in with your wet paint underneath there. Okay, and then you just get a feel for what kind of brush techniques you like. I do like the crisscross when I'm filling in large areas. When you're putting down your first layer of acrylic paint, I don't get too bogged down with what the brush strokes are looking like, because I'm going to do another layer on top. So don't want to do any unnecessary, work there. So I'll go back over top, and then when I know it's my final layer, that's when I kind of put some thought into how do I want this to look, right? My style is very loose and, like I said, impressionistic. So I'm not really big on blending super fine, but you can paint however you like. That's your choice. I'll show you a few blending techniques here. But let's get to this guy. So why I did this was to show you how transparent your colors are here. So take your white paint, right? Go through that line. So you'll see some of the black showing through. So that just shows me I just need to be thicker if I want to cover up certain spots. So that's where acrylic paints are all about layers. First layer doesn't usually cut it. There's usually a couple layers required to get a good coverage and a nice look to the painting. Now you can try your other colors and see how they look on this black marker as well. So I got some yellow here. And white is really the only opaque color in my series of acrylics. See how much that shows through there? So how do I cover that? I just add some white into my yellow. And it's probably going to take a couple coats. But that's how I cover things that are dark. I just add white into them. See what my red does here? Not too bad, but still transparent. The thicker you apply the paint, the more it covers as well. Blue, start off thick here. That's covering nice, but still transparent. So again, if you want to cover something up, you're going to want to add some white into it, or do quite a few layers. Add some white to the blue here. There we go. Solid, covers it up. And then if you want to darken it, I'd recommend letting it dry and then just go in with your dark color. So sometimes it's a matter of covering something up with white and then going back at it with the color that you actually want to get the look that you're going for. Okay, now let's do some blending techniques. All right, so I'm going to just take some yellow and some blue. Now, this is kind of like a zoomed in view here. So typically you're going to have two colors that you want to blend, right? I actually really love to blend right on the canvas. So what you can do is, mix up a bunch of colors that will blend. So I can mix up my blue and my yellow and create a green in my palette. Need quite a bit of yellow here. Okay, and then I can go down and do that. Let's do another version down here. Okay. I'm just going to quickly put this in here and some blue. So you can see the two styles of blending here. Okay. So this one I've mixed my blended color here, and then I'll simply take a bit of blue, take a bit of green, and then just blend those together. Okay, the key with blending, in my opinion, is less is more. The less I touch it, honestly, the better it is. So I got a really nice gradation there. It can be really tempting to go back in and to do more and more and more, but you got to know when to call it quits. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with mud. Okay, I'll blend this one into the green now. So get my green, and I just like to work wet on wet. Okay, if you want to smooth it out a little bit more there. There you go. Okay, and I love that looseness. Okay, we'll get back to this one here. So show you how to just blend. It's nice to have thick paint when you blend like this right on the canvas. Okay, and then I'll simply drag my brush across till I get to yellow. And then I'll drag it back a little bit and just kind of working it back and forth. Now it's really dark, so I don't want to drag it back this way. I'll probably clean my brush out if I need to smooth out that bit there. Maybe I'll pick up some more yellow here and just soften that bit up there. And that's about it. That's as much as I like to blend. Okay? So you got two techniques. I think they both work really well. Just practice that a little bit, blending. Really good to practice. Let's do another blending example here. We'll go white to red. Okay. Lots of red. Maybe we'll do the two techniques again here. I'll mix a little bit of this mid-tone on our palette. Okay, got a pink. I leave that spot in between the two to do right on the canvas. Get some white. Lots of white over here. Okay, so I'm just going to go into it. And when you work fast, you can really do a lot of blending right on your canvas. Okay, pick up a little bit of white. Looking good. Nice gradation there. Do the same below. It's nice to start with paint in your brush. So just pick up some of that white. We'll go into this pink that we made. We'll just keep going till we get to the red. And there you go. So this is a little smoother, a little softer. I prefer a little bit more brush strokes, so it's also easier to do it this way, to be quite honest. Not having to mix so much color on your palette, you just kind of let it happen on the canvas. I like that style. It's a little bit looser, a little bit more free. You decide what you like. Try it out, mix a few things up here. And yeah, that's my brush technique. I'll show you here loading the brush a little bit as well. So if I know I want to do like a really small detail, I'm just going to put a tiny bit of paint on my brush, okay? Just rubbing the edge of it there. So there's not a lot of paint gooping up my brush. I can get a small line. If I go in and I just chunk away here at the paint, like just dip it right in, okay? Just more paint on my brush. So it's just harder to get those fine lines. Another thing you can do is dip your brush in the paint and sort of scrape it off on the edge there. So that kind of thins it out so you don't have these goobs of paint everywhere. See how much of a thinner line you can get with the same brush. So loading your brush is really key to what you're doing. Let's see, take another color and show you some more of that. Maybe just some yellow. So yeah, if I want to do like a large area, take a lot of paint, mix it around. Sometimes I love showing brush strokes, so I just go real thick and leave it. And I like that look of the brush strokes in there. So just play around with your paints. Have some fun, get comfortable with them, see what you can do. Some people like to do what's like, it's kind of started out like an a floral technique where you took two different colors in your brush. So like red and white. And it gives you this cool thing here where you've got the two colors and they're just blending right on the canvas. That's a fun technique too. I don't use it a lot, but it is quite effective. Take some, do that again, some yellow on one side and then some blue on the other side. So you're like mixing right on the canvas. It's kind of fun. White, let's try some blue. There you go. The biggest thing, honestly, is just to try and to not worry about what's going to be the result. That's why kids make the best artists. They don't think about what it's going to look like. Does it look right? They just do it and have fun. And that's the best way to go with your painting, is to just have fun. I make lots of mistakes, and to be honest, a lot of them end up turning out to be learning experiences of techniques that I then take with me. So I thought it was a mistake, but ended up turning out to be happy accident. As our Mr. Bob Ross always says, it's true. So just want you to have fun with it, not be afraid of trying stuff. All right? Hey, I just wanted to show you a couple of the other brush techniques. So if you do want to explore these other styles of brushes, the angled and the fan, just what those guys can do. And we may as well look at this big one too while we're at it. Okay, so like I said, if you're only going to buy one brush, I'd get myself one of these angled brushes. They are very versatile, so it can be good for large areas, skinny details, really fine details, and kind of everything in between. So let's just use some of this paint to show you. So it can cover really big areas at a time. it can do, depending on the angle. See how I can angle my brush and get a medium-sized stroke here. Then I twist it even further, and I'm just going to be getting a small brush stroke here. So very versatile. So depending on your angle, right? Flat. Get some more paint on there. A little bit angled, a little bit more angled, totally straight. So you can vary up your brush stroke size, which is why it's the most versatile brush of them all. You can use the pointy tip to give yourself little dots, very nice dots, super tiny. So yeah, that's my opinion on that. I love this brush because of that versatility that it provides you. It's kind of the all-in-one brush. And brushes can be expensive, but they don't have to be. I would just invest in 1 or 2 or 3 brushes. You kind of like to play around with them at the beginning to see what you like. If you're more of an angular person, you might like the flat edge brushes. So this is a flat brush. So it's square at the top, as opposed to our filbert brush here. If you're softer and like the curves, you might prefer the rounded tip. Just gives your brush strokes that soft edge versus the flat edge. All personal preference. Okay. That's my angled brush. Now Papa Bear is just a big old brush. So what I love about that is when I'm working big, so like a 16 by 20 canvas for instance, this guy comes in handy for our first few layers. It's also nice to work big because it forces you to not get hung up on details. Let me just get some more paint in my palette and I'll show you these guys here. So I call this one Papa Bear because he's the big brush. And he's going to give me big brush strokes. Always say use the biggest brush possible whenever you can. It's just more efficient that way. So you're not spending a whole amount of time painting with a teeny tiny brush. And let's see what the fan brush does. Okay, it's a cool brush. I did enjoy it when I was trying out brushes. So let's see what it does. Fan brushes are great for blending. They're super soft. Let's just do a little pounce. They're great for trees. So what you do is you turn them on their side. You create a skinny line here with a wiggle. And then you simply tap it back and forth. Gives you a awesome looking tree shape with that curve and those, yeah. So that's one thing I love these for is but you don't need this, okay? I'll show you how to do that with this little guy. Baby Bear can do the same thing. So skinny little line, right? And now it's just your own brush strokes here, which I actually prefer. So yeah, try it out if you want to experiment with the brushes, but by no means do you need a fan brush. They are good for blending, so let me get some white paint and show you that. And some fresh paper. Okay, I'm just gonna swap this out. All right, so these are great for clouds. Just gonna rinse them out. So let's say take a good scoop of white. Okay. I'm going to take a good scoop of blue here. And because it's got this curved edge, it just naturally gives you these really soft brush strokes here. Okay, we'll dip back into our white Also works well flat. Okay, so you can get into some fun stuff with the fan brush, but by no means do you need one of these. I'll probably never use it in my tutorial. I just like to show you what's available, and you can decide what you like. Let's try, yeah. So some fun stuff. Have fun, explore, enjoy. Take care.